All right, guys, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Green Bay Packers and the potential of them trading for a wide receiver this offseason. A lot of the talk recently has been on the Green Bay Packers potentially getting a number one wide receiver. Even their own Josh Jacobs mentioned that they need a number one wide receiver. And there are a few names that I have in mind this offseason for trade targets at wide receiver. Because as it stands, the receiver market in terms of free agency isn't that great. It's really just T. Higgins and then a pretty decent drop-off. So if the Packers were to go out and want to get a number one wide receiver this offseason, that doesn't include the draft, if you want a proven, true number one wide receiver, it might have to be via trade. And the three names that I have in mind have been circulating a lot recently. Obviously, first, there's Davante Adams. A potential reunion there is on the table. Two other names I have in mind. Kupp is one of them. It was just announced that the Rams will be looking to trade him. And then also DK Metcalf, a younger option than compared to, Davante Adams and Kupp. DK Metcalf entering the last year of his deal, probably wants an extension. Seahawks aren't in great salary cap situation. Will they be able to give him what he wants? They could potentially trade him away. So in this video, we're going to break down each trade candidate, go over their recent stats, also talk about their contract, what it would look like if the Green Bay Packers were to trade for said wide receiver, and what it would cost. So now back into the video, let's first talk about the Green Bay Packers' current wide receiver outlook. Before last season, myself included, I was definitely guilty of this. I said, hey, our wide receiver core is fine. Look at all the talent we have in the room. Who needs a number one wide receiver when you have three guys that can be number two wide receivers? Well, things can change, right? Just because we thought that before last season, and we don't think that now before 2025, due to multiple reasons. We didn't have a single 1,000-yard wide receiver. Jaden Reed struggled with drops after a very strong start to the season. Tay Wick struggled with drops early. Christian Watson tore his ACL. Romeo Doubs had some issues with a concussion and also a team detrimental suspension. There was a lot of issues with this wide receiver room, and I think right now we're all sitting here going, hey, we need a number one guy, right? If we have a true number one wide receiver, all these guys will eat as well. It'll get better. These guys will have one-on-one matchups. The offense will flow better. That's the way I'm looking at it right now, not only because of what we saw, but because the Packers won't have Christian Watson until at minimum week 12, and that's at minimum, right? So the Packers need to replicate that style of receiver as well. We saw how stagnant the Packers wide receiver or offense as a whole got when Watson wasn't out there, and we didn't really have anyone that was capable of beating man coverage. So I think it's very fair for us Packers fans to go, hey, we should probably go trade for a true number one wide receiver, even if it's someone that's a little bit older, like Davante Adams or Kupp. These are guys that are true number one wide receivers, proven number one wide receivers that you can put out there and at least garner the attention of maybe an over-top safety, or they can beat man coverage in 1v1 consistently. They can be a quarterback's best friend on third down. And I think that's truly what Jordan Love needs to get to the next level. He needs a situation like Aaron Rodgers had where he has a Davante Adams. So speaking of Davante Adams, let's start with Davante Adams. Bringing up the screen, let's quickly go over his stats in 2024. Of course, was with the Raiders. Then the Jets traded a conditional third-round pick for him to pair him back up with Aaron Rodgers. And if Aaron Rodgers doesn't return, you can almost guarantee that Davante Adams will be traded away from the Jets. His contract is built very interestingly. When we take a look at it, right now, you'll think, okay, there's no way the Packers trade for Davante Adams because his cap hit would be astronomical. His contract was made in the sense where he's viewed as the highest paid wide receiver, but he was never going to see the end money in these final 2 years. So no matter what, his contract's going to change. And if the Packers were to trade for him, that will be reworked the moment he's traded for him. We'll talk about that here in a second. But he had an overall grade of 75.8, receiving grade 76.8. He had 135 targets, 85 receptions. He was a 1,000-yard wide receiver, and I believe he had like 800 yards in 11 games with the Jets. Very impressive stretch for considering how poor the Jets were playing. 8 receiving touchdowns. He had 12.5 yards per reception, 5.5 yards after catch per reception, a 97.9 passer rating when targeted, and an average depth of target of 9.1 yards. Now, Davante Adams is 32 years old, but I still think he has some gas left in the tank. If the Packers were to trade for Davante Adams, I think they would rework a contract to, say, a 2-year deal. When you look at Davante Adams and you look at his current contract, right, he had a cap number of $3.2 million in 2024, obviously very manageable. Then you see it jump up to $38 million cap hits in 2025 and 2026, a base salary of $35 million. This is where I kind of said the back end of his contract signed with the Raiders was simply these 2 years were put on there to make it so his average was the highest paid wide receiver. Obviously what Davante wanted and originally why the Packers sent him over to Las Vegas. So if Davante Adams was traded for, this will not remain. No team is going to pay Davante Adams a $38 million cap hit for a 32-year-old wide receiver, It's not going to happen. And a deal that I would compare to and would want to show you guys is the Mike Evans deal he got a couple years ago. Mike Evans signed a 2-year contract with the Bucs worth of base value of $41 million and $29 million fully guaranteed. So this is kind of the outlook I would see it becoming for Davante Adams. Maybe slightly different, maybe slightly less, considering, Mike Evans is younger than Davante Adams and signed this a couple of years ago when he was 29, 30 years old, and Davante now being 32. But a 2-year deal with this kind of projection in terms of contract with some void years added on, make the contract overall more manageable. This is kind of where I see it. I don't see Adams' cap hit even getting as high as $26 million in any year of his deal that he'll end up reworking, but something similar to this is kind of where I could see that happening if a team were to trade for Adams. The next potential wide receiver trade I have is Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams. The Los Angeles Rams wide receiver announced earlier this week that the team plans to trade him. Kupp was a 2017 third-round pick of the Rams and developed into one of the league's most reliable wideouts. His 2021 season, 145 receptions, almost 2,000 yards and 16 touchdowns, was one of the best in history of the position, and it ended with a Super Bowl MVP. And you might be wondering, what value does Cooper Kupp have currently, and what would it cost to get him in the building? Jeremy Fowler provided an update on Thursday stating, the executives I've been texting with today do believe that Cooper Kupp will have a market because he's quarterback friendly, he can make contested catches, he's still the smartest guy on any field he steps on, and he's a hard worker who can set a tone with a new franchise. But we might not be talking about a robust market because of age and declining production, some of the injuries, and he's due $20 million next season with $5.5 million of that guaranteed. I don't doubt the Rams would eat some of the money to facilitate the trade, so that could certainly help matters. That's a very interesting last line there by Jeremy Fowler, saying the Rams could potentially eat some of the money, because if you look at Cooper Kupp's contract, it is an expensive one for what you currently see in Cooper Kupp, a 31-year-old wide receiver, some injuries, obviously a down year, right? Didn't play too much. His cap hit this last season was $29 million for that. It remains at $29 million and is even $27 million in 2026. But the Rams definitely could eat some of this money to facilitate a trade. Now, considering Cooper Kupp still has a deal through 2026, I don't see them getting a massive, pick in return. I could honestly see a mid to late round pick, maybe a conditional one, say a 5th round that could turn into a 4th round, or a 6th round that could turn into a 4th round based on playtime, based on stats for the next upcoming season. Taking a look at Kupp's last season, of course, not a great one, riddled with injuries. He just still had 710 yards, 6 touchdowns on 67 receptions, only had 384 passing snaps. Yards per reception, 10.6. Yards after catch per reception, 4. Passer rating when targeted, very high, 110.8, and average depth of target, 8.1 yards. Now, when we plug in the trade over here on Spot Track, and you select Cooper Kupp, and you process that trade, his cap hit for 2024 would be $20 million. Now, that's a big difference from $29 million, of course, because the prorated signing bonus the Rams have to eat, but they could also convert some other money into more bonus and eat some of that to make it more enticing for a team to trade for Cooper Kupp. So likely, if the Packers were to go and trade for Kupp, his cap hit would be even lower than $20 million, maybe around $15 million, depending what the Rams would facilitate there. But I really like the thought of Cooper Kupp on the Green Bay Packers. I feel like he's a receiver that could really help Jordan Love, be a guy that he can count on third downs, be a guy that can consistently beat man coverage. And as the article said, be a quarterback's best friend in a time of need. And I feel like when healthy, and I know that's a big when, Cooper Kupp, one of the better receivers in the NFL, and just elevates your offense, a ton there. And honestly, out of all these guys, in terms of what you would have to give up, and then also what you would have to pay via contract, I think Cooper Kupp has the best value. But also let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. The last trade candidate for wide receiver is, of course, DK Metcalf. A lot younger of an option here, 27 years old. Now, this one's also very intriguing. I think this is going to cost a lot. I think it's going to be at least a second-round pick, maybe add in a late-round pick with that, just due to the age, due to the potential. But the Seahawks are in cap hell. They're over the cap right now. They might have to give Geno an extension. I just don't know if they're going to be able to give DK Metcalf the extension he wants. And that's another thing, right? You have to trade for DK and also give him a mega deal and make him one of the higher paid receivers in the NFL. Last season, he did have nearly 1,000 yards in what most people would consider not a wonderful year, but still almost had 1,000 yards, 66 receptions, 992 yards, 5 touchdowns, all the way up to 15 yards per reception, yards after catch per reception at 4, passer rating when targeted, 99, and average depth of target, 14.3 yards. With one season left on a 3-year, $72 million contract extension he signed in July 2022, the 27-year-old Metcalf undoubtedly will be looking for a new deal that keeps him on pace with the league's booming wide receiver market. But with other Seahawks also in line for potential extensions, including veteran quarterback Geno Smith, it's possible Metcalf could command more money and salary cap space than Seattle is willing to commit. If the two sides are unable to reach an agreement on an extension, it's possible the Seahawks could look to trade Metcalf. ESPN insider Jeremy Fowler suggested as much in an article last week in an annual piece based on predictions from NFL team executives, scouts, and other personnel figures. Fowler posted the idea of Seattle dealing its star wideout to the Los Angeles Chargers. With the big trades that we've seen with wide receivers in recent years, we've seen everything from basically a second-round pick to a fourth-round pick, Tom Pelissero said. I would think DK, as young as he is, would be pushing toward the high end of that. Maybe you can even get a first-round pick for him, especially because this year is not a super deep group of free agent wide receivers. There's not a ton of dudes. So if you want a top-flight receiver, you might have to give up something really substantial in terms of draft capital to get him. So this one, I'm kind of on the fence. Do you give up a second-round pick for DK Metcalf when you can probably get a pretty good wide receiver in the second round of this year's draft and also pay top market for DK Metcalf, who is 27 years old, which is still young by wide receiver standards, but is he really going to grow into much more? I think we already know what DK Metcalf is. It's what you see is what you get. Whereas a second round rookie wide receiver could have sky high potential and still be on a rookie deal when he's one of the best in the league. I know that's wishful thinking, but it can definitely happen. Now, just to show you guys, if we were to trade for DK Metcalf and process that trade, he would count $18 million against the salary cap. But again, I think he would command a new deal once a team traded for him. Another reason why it seems likely that the Seahawks will trade him in 2025, he's set to have a $31 million cap hit. So to lower this, you would have to give him an extension. And I just don't really know if Seattle's willing to do that right now based on their current salary cap. So overall, of these three wide receivers, I honestly think the most favorable one for me personally is Cooper Kupp. I really like the idea of him in this offense. I think he could add a lot to this offense. And don't get me wrong, Davante Adams, obviously us Packers fans know how good Davante can be. DK Metcalf is very intriguing because he's a younger option. I just feel like you'd be paying too much in terms of draft capital and the money, where Cooper Kupp is kind of in that medium ground where it's like, hey, you wouldn't have to give up a crazy pick. The Rams would eat some of the money. He wouldn't have a crazy cap hit for the next couple of years, and you get a really good wide receiver when healthy. And I think that's what exactly could help the Packers get over the hump. But of course, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Which one of these three wide receivers would you want the Packers to trade for the most? And if there's another one that you're thinking of, like a Garrett Wilson, obviously let me know down in the comments below. I do appreciate you guys coming by to the channel. Please leave a like down below if you did like the video. Also, a reminder to go check out BetUS. Use code YouTube150 at sign up for a 150% deposit match on your first deposit. But I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go.